Hey everyone, welcome back to Brownble. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're giving you a new and updated version of one of our most watched videos, our blueberry and sweet potato chocolate cake that is absolutely to die for. With these new changes, this is gonna be foolproof and a total crowd pleaser. We're gonna get started right now. The first step in making this recipe is to, of course, preheat your oven. We're preheating at 350 degrees, which is about 176, 180 Celsius. And we need to prepare our pan. So this is a standard cake pan with a kind of, a springform pan, so you can take away this side part. And what I've done is I've cut a little circle of parchment paper, and we're also gonna add a little bit of oil to our pan just to make sure that it won't stick. I always prefer to be safer than sorry, but just a little bit of that. You can also use a paper towel and wipe it with a bit of non-dairy butter or oil, and then we press down our parchment paper and it's gonna stick. We set this aside and we're gonna start with one of the bases of this recipe, which is some sweet potato. We're gonna peel, cube, and measure out our sweet potato and place it in a steamer basket and let it steam until tender. You can also roast it in the oven. Next up, we're gonna make some buttermilk, and we do that by adding some non-dairy milk. I'm using soy milk today. The richer the milk, the better, but choose, just use what you have. Choose the milk that you like. And we need an acidic ingredient to create our buttermilk. I'm using apple cider vinegar. Now we whisk and set it aside. Now we're gonna mix together our dry ingredients. Now the great thing about this recipe is that it's also gluten-free. So I want you to take either some gluten-free oat flour or gluten-free oats and process them in a blender until you get a fine powder like this. We're gonna add that to a bowl. Oat flour has this wonderful property in that it absorbs a lot of moisture and it gives this nice sweet flavor, this nutty flavor. It just makes for the best pancakes and cakes and things like that when you want a gluten-free option. We also need our cocoa powder, of course, because it's a chocolate cake. We're also gonna add some salt. Always add salt in sweet recipes as well as savory ones, especially if you're using chocolate, because that boosts all of that chocolate flavor in the cake. We're also using some baking soda and some baking powder. Let's combine all of that together and we set it aside, and we're gonna grab our food processor. Now I want you to keep in mind that this is not a traditional cake. It's not the type of, it's not like a bundt cake or a traditional cake in that it's going to be fluffy and have a lot of air to it. This is very, very similar to a flourless chocolate cake. It's gonna be dense and moist, and it's not gonna rise a lot in the oven, but that's what we want. We want that amazing rich texture. It's so chocolatey, you won't believe it. Now, as a sweetener, we're going to be using dates in this recipe. You need some pitted dates, and what I like to do is I like to soak them in water overnight. The night before I'm gonna make this recipe, I just let them soak. If you only have an hour, that will also help. 2 hours, any time you have, that's gonna help make them really pliable and the whole mixture come together really nicely so that that sweetness in the dates kind of gets spread out throughout the cake. You can also use medjool dates, which are a little bit softer. So, anything you have time for. We're going to go ahead and drain these of that water, and we're gonna add these to our food processor. And these are gonna soak up quite a bit of water, so press it down. We're gonna add those dates in. If you don't have a food processor, you can also do this in a blender. Another great ingredient of this recipe that I love, those flavors coming together are some blueberries. Blueberries and chocolate is always a good mix. Next, we add our sweet potato and we blend away. We want a really creamy and uniform texture. What you'll want is this very, very creamy texture where everything is nicely incorporated. To this, we're gonna add a bit of vanilla extract for flavor and a bit of oil. Now this can be coconut oil, canola oil, safflower, sunflower, anything you have on hand that is kind of neutral tasting, and we turn it out on once more to make sure everything is combined. Now it's time to put everything together. We're almost done with this cake. So we're gonna add the buttermilk that we created earlier. And of course, we need to add our sweet potato mixture. Now the base of this cake is kind of really rich in that chocolate flavor, and maybe you would like it a little bit sweeter. So if you want it a little bit sweeter, feel free to add, a little bit of maple syrup or agave, but I love it very rich like this. And then we're gonna add some chocolate sauce on top that's gonna add that extra sweetness. For me, that's the perfect way to make this cake. Now we add it to our prepared pan and we pop it in the oven. You wanna do this immediately as soon as you've mixed it together, because that oat flour really absorbs moisture. You don't want it to get overly dry. Now we're gonna pop our cake in our preheated oven. In my oven, the cooking time for this cake is about an hour, so you have to be patient. That way it's gonna firm up nicely so you can slice into it. It's still gonna be a moist and rich, dense cake, okay? Not the typical crumbly cake that you would get using regular flour. Now I want you to keep an eye on it after about 35 minutes to see if the top is getting too dark. If that's happening, you really want to protect your cake from burning, so cover it with foil for the remaining time. And after about 45 minutes, you can start testing it with a toothpick to see if it comes out clean. When that happens, it's ready. I've just taken our cake out of the oven and placed it on a cooling rack, let it cool a little bit, and while that's going on there, we're going to prepare our sauce. So for this, I'm using a double boiler, which basically just means that you have a small pot with a little bit of water, and then a glass bowl, a heat-resistant glass bowl on top. That's the best way to melt chocolate so that it doesn't burn. So we're just gonna let that get nice and melted, and then we're gonna add some non-dairy milk slowly. We're gonna take our cake out of the pan, so grab a knife and just run it down the sides. And if you're using a springform pan, this is gonna be so easy. We're just gonna pop the latch and turn it over. All we have to do now is pour our gorgeous chocolate sauce on top. And we're gonna tilt the cake and let it come down the sides a little bit. Now, because we added those blueberries in the cake, I love to top the cake with some additional berries. I love that combination of the tartness of the berries and that sweetness of the chocolate. So just top and make a nice design and you're ready to serve. Thanks so much for making this with me. The texture is so rich and dense. You will love this cake, and hopefully you'll make it at home and show us your pictures using the hashtag Brownble. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got so much more content coming, and that way it'll notify you when new videos are up.